there any Americans here? Okay. So on that login, they misspelled center. Okay. So when you try to log in, it's not going to work for you. So I have a choice. I could talk about the Battle of Midway, because my father was there. Or maybe some inclination as to how to scale Agile. Which are we going to pick? Can we go with Agile? Can we go with scaling Agile? Okay, good. I brought the right presentation. Thanks. Can somebody remind me of my time box again? I forgot that. 40 minutes? Is that right?
Yeah, 45.
40 to 45. So 40 minutes. So at like 20 after, we could have some Q&A?
Yeah.
And then I can bolt off this stage like you wouldn't believe. Okay.
Yeah, well, we've locked the doors.
Okay. Bolt the corner. Okay, so I'm going to talk today about the Scaled Agile Framework. I'm going to talk about it a little bit more. I'm going to talk about the principles and basically the value systems that drive the framework. The framework is, how many of you have logged into scaledagilepFramework.com at least once? Thank you. The framework is a representation, it's a recording, really, if you will, of some things that we've seen work across industry, but it's also based upon principles, so that in the recording, when we find a pattern that seems to work, if we understand the basic principles that support the pattern, then you can have some confidence in that pattern, and therefore we record it. So I will also tell you something. It's not quite a method. It's really more of a story. It's kind of descriptive. Frankly it's hard to read in its current form because it is a website. It's like a database with a query engine. You know, you have to do the work yourself. But it's written to be readable and to describe some best practices and roles and activities and artifacts that actually work in a number of industries. So the title of today's talk is Be Agile, Scale Up, and Stay Lean, and let's get started. So my conversion to Agile was about the same time as everybody else's when it came around, right? I was at Rational till from 97 to about 2000 or 2001, and involved in the Rational Unified process, which might be fun to make fun of like waterfall, but I will tell you that was the first codification of iterative and incremental development that we had on the market at the time. And I think in 1997, not such a bad thing to recognize that the trying to do software, one time and get it right wasn't really a great plan. And that history, even the waterfall history, is based upon our thinking in the 70s and 80s, which is the systems were, frankly, a lot less complex. They were a lot smaller. They could be built by less people. The total quality management movement was out there. The idea was 0 defects, build it right once. It's a great plan, right? It just didn't work out that way, okay? But there's nothing wrong with the plans that were there at the time. So I've been at this for some time. I've been mostly responsible for software development throughout my career. First 18 years, I was CEO of a company, and we developed a lot of things, including medical equipment. And then when you're in the medical equipment business, if you make a mistake, it's really bad form, right? People die. So I've been quite concerned about software quality, literally from day one. And I wouldn't be standing on this stage if I didn't feel that these new methods, these new Agile methods, deliver higher software quality than anything we had going before. If there was another method that I thought did a better job, I'd talk about that instead. So it's not something, this is something that I'm passionate about in terms of improving the lives of developers and practitioners and software outcomes, but I'm not emotional about the framework itself, because that's just really a recording of some things that a lot of great people have invented and done good work with. I'm kind of a compulsive writer. Every few years a bunch of stuff bubbles up and I think I understand something, and I write basically to think. And when I write and think and when I read my writing, it sometimes doesn't make sense to me. Do some of you do that? Just write the memo and read it back and see, does that make sense? It's a unit test, right, of your thoughts. You write it out and send the feedback back. And the last book is Agile Software Requirements. My book in 2007 was called Scaling Software Agility. There's a small story in there for today, a very small story, which is my editor warned me about that book. He said that I don't think you're going to have much success with that book. And I said, are you worried about whether Agile scales or the methods work? And he said, no, not at all. But he said, who are you writing the book for? I said, I'm writing for the people who are going to do the implementation, not the practitioners. They already got a ton of help, right? They could find XP and Scrum and coaches like crazy, and methods abound. That's not a problem. They're self-starters. That's the issue. I said, I really feel like we need to reach out and talk to management and director level people, because that's really where the issues lie, right? The systems that we work in, Deming would tell you that the systems that we work in are the responsibility of management, not the worker, okay? And so in that discussion, I said, well, why are you concerned? He said, well, Dean, our data shows that they're not necessarily lifelong learners. So what do you think he meant by that? What was he saying? What was his data?
They don't read.
They don't read as many books, right? There's a time at which we start to be comfortable with what we know how to do, and we get very comfortable in that mode. Yeah, how many of you work with devs pretty much every day or every week? Okay. Picture their desk. Tell me what you see on their desk right now. Picture their desk. Is it clean? No. Why not? What's there?
Coffee stains.
Coffee stains and books. Are they open or closed? Open. 3, 5, 7 at a time, right? Same for our testers, right? They're reading test protocols, and they've got, hopefully, Agile Testing, one of the coolest books ever written. Now picture your manager's, your boss's office. Walk in and sit down. What's his desk look like? Pretty clean. There's a bookshelf in the back. It's even dusted. And every book is nicely arranged, right? Nothing is dog-eared back there. So I'm one of those managers. You're, you know, in some ways, but I'm a lifelong learner. You are too. So I'm not worried about you, but I'm worried about the people you work with, because they're the ones that are really helping build the systems and defining the systems, not the software systems we create. That's more of a practitioner craft. The systems that we live in to create the systems. And we have to reach that community and give them the tools they need and give them the inspiration they need and give them motivation they need to succeed. I don't know what that has to do with that slide, I guess, because the Scaling Software Agility didn't sell very well. So I wrote another book. I wanted to title it Scaling Software Agility, Now Really Working, but the editor couldn't go with that. So I called it Agile Software Requirements. It's selling great, by the way. So a much better story there in terms of the framework, et cetera. So in about 2005 or 2006, so my epiphany was 2001 and 2002. Very simply, long story short, I got involved. I learned XP from a guy who I couldn't really program at that time, but we pretended to pair. And we sat down and I watched him code, and I was kind of as able to follow his code. And then he took this little sidebar journey down the side and said, I'm writing some more code now. And I was looking at the code and I go, well, that's not the method we just described. And he said, this is a test for the method that I just wrote. And I said, why are you writing a test for the method you just wrote? Because he said, otherwise I won't know if it works. I said, well, we've been writing code for 30 years. We assume it works, right? He says, I don't assume it works. I assume it doesn't work. And until I put this unit test on it, I'm just not willing to submit it back into the baseline. And he said, Dean, you need to understand the way we work here. He said, we're an XP shop, and when we do our planning, I take responsibility for work. And that was my user story. I took responsibility. User stories come from XP, by the way. He said, I took responsibility for that story. So this story has to work before I put it back in the baseline. On another level, my goal has really become much simpler. I'm dealing with executives and managers every day who I'm saying, you know, you're going to have to take responsibility for this transformation. It can't be done by the Agile Working Group. It can't be done by the teams themselves. It has to be done by you. So that's what I do. I challenge managers and executives every day. They listen to me for a couple reasons. One, I'm older than they are. That kind of helps. So young whippersnappers don't have that. And second, I've shipped a lot of software. Okay, and that creates a certain kind of respect. So 2005 and 2006, I took my newfound XP and Scrum skills. I took a Ken Schwaber Scrum class, and let me simplify it for a second. I learned XP from an XP programmer, and relearned what really great code was like. I took a class from Ken Schwaber, a Scrum class, and relearned the simplest possible mechanism for software project management. But guess what? I learned what a team was. This is 10, 11 years old, so I'm like already getting old right then. It's the first time I actually knew what a team was. That 7 plus or minus 2 thing, it actually really works. And if they focus on the code, holy cow. It's really a pretty awesome thing. So I was impressed by that. So even in the progress we made with the Rational Unified Process, we didn't have that. We had lots of roles and lots of responsibilities, but this fundamental notion of the fighting team that creates software, that cares about their code, the Japanese word for this ba-like experience of a group of individuals that see the code and the knowledge and the energy and the work all as one thing, right? That's kind of a unique thing. And Agile brought us that. I didn't bring us that. I didn't have anything to do with it. I just found it and said, ooh, that's really cool. It's like picking the best rose out of the flower bed and giving it to your wife. So that's I just found that one. I didn't actually grow that. So I started 2007, 2008 with the help of some people in this room, by the way, starting codifying some of this work and saying this seems to work and this seems to work. And we started at one point. I was facing down a really large PMO, big scary PMO, 300 people in this PMO. And my goal was to kind of tip them to large-scale agile development in 45-minute chunks, because they had like 30 or 45 minimum time. And I thought about that for a while. I thought about the challenge, and I realized I didn't have much for them, because our stories are, our Dilbert jokes about Agile and the Agile Manifesto and the power of Scrum. Does a PMO really consider that their area of concern? Not really. And they either believe their people are empowered, or they hope they're empowered and it's not their job, or they don't really care, right? It's not really the point. So I said, what we need to do is I want to express to them the after case. I'd like to show them what we've seen in terms of how your business could work once it really is operating down an agile path, because they know how it works now. And I'm in here saying the way it works now isn't good enough, and they already know that. But they need to understand a new way of working, and you have to kind of paint a picture. Say it could work a lot like this. So after 100 and some revisions of the picture, and actually eventually hiring a designer and a web dev, that both of whom drive me absolutely crazy day to day, we turned it into a framework that's now online. And I was in a discussion the other day with some folks about some of the roles, and they were saying, well, that role there is kind of interesting and blah, 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 and what about it? And I said, I had to make a joke. I said, do you know that you can actually click on that? If you click on that, it'll actually answer that question. They clicked on it, oh, holy cow. So I don't just have to read the picture and figure out what's there. There's a lot more content there. But why? Why did we head down that path? Why was it important? I blame it all on Gordon Moore, okay? His dang Moore's Law, right? How many remember their first hard drive? Probably nobody. This is going to be really embarrassing. Or the people that remember may not put up their hand. But come on, trust me. How many remember their first hard drive? Mine was 12 megabytes, $4,000, okay? And Gordon Moore said, this isn't enough, we need to really roll. And they rolled, right? Did Intel roll or what? And all the others rolled. So we have this massive computing power now, massive capability. We couple that to massive imagination. I mean, who here hangs out with product managers or product owners or BAs? Isn't it easy to envision what the software could do? That's like Moore's Law and exponential or something. Like I want to be able to upload my data when I'm walking in my car. Well, fine, that's a great idea, but it's pretty hard to do. 20 years ago, we didn't think we'd write software this way. 20 years ago, we thought that we would be writing software at extremely powerful CAD stations, which we have, and extremely powerful languages, which we basically have, extremely powerful visual representations, which we could create, and that we would be basically, every software system, by the way, can be implemented and executed as a definitive state machine. So that's what we thought we'd be doing, but we're not. Instead, we have how many? 10, 20 million people writing individual lines of code every day, each line of which could take your entire system down for the count. That seems problematic to me, right, in the overall big picture. So I think we need better ways to deal with that. The tip revision of what we have is Agile. Now, I also get criticized. I got absolutely flamed the other day on the blog because I said Agile is an incredible tool to solve some of these industry problems. And I said it 3 times, and this woman came on the blog post, and she just killed me. She's like, oh my God. He said, it's just a tool. It's just a tool. He said, it's just a tool. For her, it's a religion. For me, it's not. For me, it is a really cool way to empower teams and individuals to create better software. Now, I'll follow that mission, right? But if something else came along and it was called Finkel and it worked better, couldn't we do that? Or would we have to go, no, we still have to stick with Agile? So the labels don't really matter, right? What matters are whether we're able to prove outcomes. And one of the extraordinary things about Agile that, frankly, I didn't have the fun experience of for the first 20 or 30 years is that Agile essentially starts at the team level and is then all good. Quality goes up, velocity goes up, employee engagement goes up, outcomes get better. There's no downside to that. So before, if you pushed on quality, you could slow things down. If you pushed on productivity, you would screw up quality, and both of which would hurt employee engagement. But we don't have to do that now. Now, it's 2013 or so, depending on where I am, whether I got the year right. And we have some amazing depth and bodies of knowledge. And I'm not a person who sees a new thing and immediately thinks that my shiny old object is stupid, right? I just sold it, but I still kind of like my '89 Saab right up to the day I sold it, right? It's a pretty cool car. So we have some amazing pools of knowledge. We have agile development and lean thinking and product development flow, a relatively new, a new set of threads. We have our experience in iterative incremental development, and make fun of it if you will. Those shops, they're hard to change. They're doing pretty well. I've got shops, a number of large enterprises I go into that are successfully executing iterative and incremental development, and they don't suffer from the pain of some of the other shops that haven't moved that far. So it's a little tougher. Maybe their iterations are a little long, but they're doing fine. And then we took it to the field and we said, let's try how to do this. I actually took it to the field initially at BMC Corporation. And after 3, 4, and 5 years, we started getting results back, and the results were nothing short of astounding. Astounding. I mean, I was expecting increases in productivity and quality. I wouldn't have done it. I wasn't expecting data like this, okay? And I would think it's a bunch of BS if it weren't for the fact it's not my data, right? It's the data reported by companies like this, like John Deere, ISG, Intelligent Systems Group, all in agile transformation across 400 or 500 people, building combines and tractors and sprayers that ship every single year in January. You want to see what waterfall looks like, or at least the waterfall thinking looks like, go through a planning process for shipping a model year 2014 combine. This is a very rigorous process. Talk about mixing hardware and software development with agile methods. This is as waterfall as you might get in terms of the fact that it's leaving January 13th. And very early in the year, we have to know almost everything about it or we're not going to be able to make it. But that doesn't mean you can't be agile. Don't confuse having a deadline and actually having an understanding of what you need with waterfall. That's an execution problem, right? But we talked in this room a little bit, and a couple of people talked about what happens when we have these big fat specs. Can't be agile. Well, I'm not so sure, okay? Consider it an overly constraining, way too detailed, overly elaborated backlog, right? And pick the most important stuff and deliver it first, okay? Go from there. BMC software, they measured productivity. We went in and we stripped out everything. So we didn't invent, if you will, the safe at a desk. We went to BMC Corporation. We threw out everything. I wasn't permitted to engage with a PMO, and I figured out why. Because 3 months later, I went down there and there wasn't one. Okay, we stripped out the software development lifecycle guidance. We basically told all the managers, we're not sure what our role is anymore. We're not sure what your role is anymore. But if you're here to help, we'll do it. And we went down and dirty with XP and Scrum, and we made progress. And then we immediately hit obstacles. Okay, immediately hit obstacles. And we had to work back from there. Now, Israel Gott, who drove that transformation, he's a bright guy. And he was willing to basically throw out everything except one thing, which is we will measure what we do. I have a love-hate relationships with measurements because I love them when they work and I hate them when they don't, okay? And they actually instrumented their teams across 300 or 400 developers. With the QSM associates came in and measured function points per developer per month. Now again, I'm not a huge fan of that, but guess what? Developers do create function points per month, don't they? And don't we sell that stuff? So argue, if you will, that's a good measure. Because it's got 20 to 50% increase in productivity across 400 people for a company that was struggling that year for EPS, earnings per share. Does anybody know what earnings per share means? Yeah. And when you're struggling for earnings per share, what does that mean? It means you don't have any more money to spend. So what can we do if we're already kind of at rock bottom costs, we don't have any more money to spend, increase productivity, and they did. And others like it. I won't bore you with any more other than maybe TradeStation Technologies, because I'll tell you about TradeStation because we almost gave up. I think there was a time when we each gave up on each other. I wasn't sure they were going to make it, and they weren't sure that my method was going to make it, but they stayed at it. And what they stayed at, by the way, was the inspect and adapt cycle built into SAFe, much bigger than a retro. And I was on a chairlift December of last year with my wife skiing, and I got a text from Keith Black, the VP, and he said, Dean, check out Barron's Magazine. I texted back, Keith, I'm on a chairlift here, and that's going to be kind of hard. Tell me the punchline. He said, we just won Barron's Award for the best trading experience in technology. And he will tell you for sure. If you email Keith Black, he's on the website there. He'll say, we didn't win it the 3 years prior, guaranteed. So it works, okay? It's documented, it works. And other methods work too. It's just that I happen to know this method and I happen to know that these people applied this method. So I don't claim that there could be 71 ways to scale Agile. I don't know. I know one that works, and that's the one we're working on. But I remember going back to that PMO organization and trying to figure out what I had to talk to those people with and what story I could tell them. And in my bag of tricks, I had almost nothing. I had this after case, and I have my belief systems around the manifesto, and that wasn't adequate. So I went back to some of my training in Lean, and I was really lucky. I think in '86 or so, one of my companies acquired a manufacturing plant, and it immediately started to take the company down, and I had to go figure out how to help. And because I was a lifelong learner, I started reading books, and the books at the time was Gold Rat, The Theory of Constraints. And anybody read The Goal? A kind of funky novel from the past. So I learned Theory of Constraints, and by the way, Theory of Constraints is still there. We don't talk about it. Every one of your large software programs has a bottleneck. And if you are investing in improving things that aren't affecting the bottleneck, you're probably not doing what you could do for predictability. How many have read The Phoenix Project? Okay, so the rest of you, read The Phoenix Project. Start it Saturday, you'll finish it Monday. Saturday night, how many are in IT or DevOps or close to it? You will basically be reading it in a cold sweat, okay? You will immediately recognize the problem. Long story short, Lean is a much broader set of thinking tools, and we need those thinking tools. And I can't really describe them here because they are so rich and so deep, but I will point out a few. This is the house of Lean that we use, and it has a couple of really interesting characteristics. The first one is we know why we use it. Agile is very good, but if I spent some time and went through this room and asked about what the purpose of Agile is, I get 11 answers. The purpose of Lean is really, really clear. Sustainably shortest lead time with best quality and value to people in society. And you can almost stop at the first one if you're going upstairs. If you're trying to sell, your Agile methods, and you need a little broader view, then wow, it's not just about Scrum, because we need to talk about architecture and roadmaps and vision and that type of thing. There's more to be done. Taiichi Ohno basically says the way to get faster is to figure out where all the delays are and eliminate them. Mary Poppendick's note was, well, if we could deliver software before our customers change their mind, then by definition they'd be happy with it. Al Shalloway notes that most everything wrong with your software process ends up in a delay. If you ever have any really kind of crappy projects that came out early? No, they're all late, right? So look at the delays. The most important book, in my opinion, that's been written in the last 20 or 30 years about product and software development is Don Reinertsen's Principles of Product Development Flow. I suspect that only a few people here have read it. How many have read it? How many have read it and completed it? Okay, you're my heroes, okay? It's a very lightweight, it's not a lightweight book, it's a short book. But what Don Reinertsen does is go back to first principles and say, look, we need to understand the nature of our activity, and it's not what we thought it was. And here is his 8 principles, and I can't really go into any of them, but they live with me every day. And if you head down the safe path, they're going to start being what you think about every day, because all the training is oriented around that. Understand the economics of your business. Make decisions based upon that. Create an economic decision-making framework that empowers your teams. If you're a manager and you know how you make decisions, how many here are managers? And you know how you make decisions. Are they arbitrary? No. You have some process you go through, some thinking process. You have some brackets. You have some parameters. What is that decision-making framework? Write it out. Share it with your teams. What will happen? They'll start to know how to make decisions better. A little bit of empowerment happens right there. More actively manage queues, understand and exploit variability, reduce batch sizes. I wish I had 2 hours, because if I had 2 hours, I would only talk about Lean, and the last 3 I'd show you a couple slides, okay? Reduce batch sizes, apply work and process constraints, counterintuitive to a lot of our managers. If we're not able to get software out of a manufacturing plant making combines in Waterloo, Iowa, or hardware, if we're not getting combines out of there, we're not tempted to put more parts on the floor. We're tempted to get the parts on the floor out of there so I can put some new things on the floor. When your software programs are late, what do? Push more stuff on the floor, right? And increase work in process. What happens when you increase work in process beyond the capacity of the system that's trying to do the work? It clogs, it stops. Does it just decay linearly? If you go out on the M5 and it's running really, really busy, it's running absolutely full flight, and you put 10% more work in process on there, 10% more cars, do you get a 10% reduction in speed? No, what do you get? You get a catastrophic reduction in throughput. Is it possible that some of the software teams you're working with or software programs, your entire shop, is seeing a catastrophic reduction in throughput because of excess work in process? Is it possible? Yeah. Absolutely. Got to find it, got to get it out, right? Flow will not increase until then. You see the rest here, cadence and synchronization, but I got to get going. Okay. Let's start by being agile. And let's not forget, why we're here, and where we come from. 3 or 4 years ago, I got so bored with the manifesto, I took it out of all my stuff. I just couldn't stand to put the slide up anymore. Big mistake. If this and the principles, this is fine. This is fine. It's the principles behind it that really tell the teams how to behave. It's the principles behind it that say, like, business people and developers work together every day. Principles behind it that say, hire motivated individuals and trust them to get the job done. Right? If you can't do that, if you don't trust your individuals to get the job done, don't do Agile. Right? You stick with your command and control systems. So you can't leave it behind. And it produces great results, because this was the simplest graphic. I came across this a year and a half ago. My partner, Drew, had this graphic on his desk, and I said, that's a cool, I've made 81 why you might do Agile graphs, and this is the best one I've ever seen. I go to my customer, I say, okay, in 6 weeks, in 8 weeks or so, I could give you some documents or a couple of cool shipments of the early stuff. What you want? What you want to buy? I'd rather have the box, right? So that's not a complicated decision. Just I'll take the box, and we'll get a bigger box and a bigger box, and away we go. And what's interesting about those little boxes, they're really, really valuable. So I have an Apple phone in my pocket. I didn't get to work for those guys. That would have been fun. I worked for some of their competitors, and Apple cleaned their clock. The first phone I had here was incredibly expensive, and it didn't do very much. There was no, oh my goodness, if you remember those days. Getting to be an aging platform now, by the way. They need to get on the program. But at the day, there was no GPS, there's no app store, there was no compass. The phone was like one of those little phones that you get your kids at Disneyland for underwater photography. Not the phone, the camera. I got mine from AT&T, couldn't even make a phone call. Okay? But I paid a ton for that little bit of functionality because it was innovative and differentiated. That's where all the money is. If your enterprise wants to make money, you have to sell differentiated products, because in the end, it's all a commodity. And now look at the gross margins. Now look at what happens when Apple had that phone and the iPad. And when they launched the iPad without a camera, you think Steve Jobs knew they were going to put a camera on it the next revision? Do you think I bought one with and without a camera? Yeah. Okay. So what happens is, if you want to care about the money, and that's an okay thing, right? Making money is okay. You can do that in the UK, can't you? Okay, cool. We're good. So it's worth a lot early on, and then it goes away. But now if I ship incrementally, boom, I get all this stuff. Versus here, I don't even start until then. What's the integrated value of all the high-priced iPhones had before Nokia caught up with really a decent competitive phone just about now? Anybody know how much money Apple has in their bank? $55 billion. A couple of billion of which I think is mine. I bought every device they have. Nothing beats an Agile team on its game. And I would spend more time on this, because this is really where we start. There is no scaling software agility without scaling Agile teams that are on their game. And I had a dinner with Jeff Sutherland 4 or 5 months ago, and he said, how's things going, Jeff? And I said, pretty good. What are you seeing? I'm seeing a lot of programs really fail. And he says, I see a lot of terrible Scrum. I see a lot of people that can't build working software in a time box. We dispatched one of our guys out to a company the other day that was doing Agile and doing Scrum and really struggling, and we got there, and they had 3 product owners for every Scrum team, each of whom reported to a different divisional vice president. Seriously, and that's Scrum. I saw a Scrum team of requirements analysts just 6 months ago. I don't even know what to say to that. It's like, where does this stuff come from? So, to be more serious, Agile is serious. Creating working quality code is hard in a time box. It's not a trivial thing, and nothing beats Agile teams at doing that. And you can see that here, but I won't go into too much detail. But a couple things. Scrum is cool. Does that make Kanban stupid? The little wars between the Kanbaners saying, we don't even need deadlines, that's planning overhead, and we don't even estimate. And the Scrummers say, you don't understand the value of a deadline when it comes to kind of really accelerating performance and bringing focus to an event and providing system integration points. What are they arguing about? Is there some reason you can't have both? It's like I could have, like, it's Thanksgiving, I could have a half a piece of cherry pie and a half a piece of pumpkin pie. It's still only one piece of pie, right? It's all good. I haven't seen anything here that's stupid. I see people looking at their thing as a form of religion rather than a form of value. So we use all of that in the framework. And some people say, well, it's an amalgamation. It's an aggregation of disparate parts. Yeah, that can work together. You just need to have the wits to do that. A few years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, when we did our rollouts, we focused initially on the Scrum practices, and didn't come back around to software engineering until phase 2. And when we came back around in software engineering practices, we got another big boost. But at some point, I got bored or old and decided that, come on, these are development teams. There's no reason we can't do both. There's no reasons we can't understand things like pairing, not necessarily pair programming, but pair work. Who wants a line of code to go into their deep system that runs their enterprise that hasn't at least been seen by one other people? Who wants that? Nobody here wants that, right? So pairing is really, really valuable. And XP taught us that. We pair. We pair on virtually everything and more. You can see them here, and you can read them on the website. And if you go click on code quality, you can get a story about those things, which means that I don't have to tell you about it now. But now we have to scale up. We have teams. Some people I remember some discussions about Kent Beck with Kent Beck and Ron Jeffries about XP can't scale. And you know, they're totally right. It doesn't scale up because nobody writes any software above you. But you can have as many XP teams as you want, right? So it does scale that way, but it doesn't scale this way. Scrum is a project management practice. That's the one we want to scale this way. Now, when it goes to scale up, you come back to some first principles. And there are 2 systems that work here in the big picture. If you look at a big picture, you should be thinking about 2 things. You should be thinking about the system that is the organization that creates the software. And its components will become selfish. Those teams and those departments, they will locally optimize, right? Won't they? And why shouldn't they? That's all they can control. So if you ask them to perform better, they're going to perform better in their own local way. But that doesn't create a system, right? What we need to do is we need to optimize the overall system, and the system must be managed. We do that by this thing we call the Agile release train, which I struggle to provide an easy description for because there's so many aspects rolled into one. We roll in the roles. How many here work with system architects? Raise your hand. How many here want them to go away? A small subset. The system architects you're talking about, I assume, aren't particularly capable, right? If you want them to go away? Not particularly capable. That's fair. If they were capable, would you keep them? Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So if you're building big systems, systems architects are the people who don't worry about the details of the code. They worry about the big picture. They can describe the system in its architectural components. I like to hang around with those guys. If you're going to go in to do an agile transformation, go find that person and buy them coffee. Grab them by the arm. Hang with them. They know how the system works. That's going to be really helpful. That's just one example. It's also, from a lean perspective, it's a talent pooling construct. Because if I have all these teams working independently, and I have a problem where I need to make a change, all the teams have their own mission. Boom, 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 boom. But I have them all working collectively towards a new mission, and some problem comes in the side, then I have this talent pool that can flex to the problem. It's like cross-training on the manufacturing floor. Ooh, I have a problem in that area. I have other people who can help with that. So it's a group of people who include the team level, by the way. It's actually included. This is part of the program level. That now have the capabilities, including UX guidance and architectural guidance and program management guidance and a system team to help put the pieces together when necessary to do the job. So I have a bigger thing to deal with now. And if you want to get attention in your organization, have large programs execute better. What do you think? Would that get attention? Absolutely, and that's the focus. So if you're thinking about the framework, we don't think about it as a team thing. We think about it as a program thing, but the teams are part of the program. Is building large software systems a fundamentally social event? It requires communication, empathy, compassion, the ability to help others, and cooperation, right? So we have to build a social network. So the release train is also a social network, and it has a few rules, and this social network rules is we're going to produce something really big on a metronome. We're going to use cadence and synchronization to bring our things together. So principles of product development flow, add that to your reading list. That you won't be able to read in a weekend. That'll take a little while. You read a sentence and you have to put it down and sleep on it. But it is a fantastic work. And I keep looking, by the way, because I talk about Reinertsen so much that it's kind of embarrassing. It's like I'm a Reinertsen groupie. And I keep reading everything else. So as soon as I can find something, I could say, and also read X. Read Reinertsen. It's still the only thing out there that tells this story. And basically makes a few simple notes here is that, development typically delivers information asynchronously in large batches. Flow-based processes don't do that. They deliver information in small batches in a cadence. Okay? And that keeps things in flow because the big blob sits and clogs the works up. So what's an example of a really big batch in traditional software development? Software requirement specification. A big bunch of code that didn't go to DevOps yet. And you start thinking about batch sizes, and you think about synchronizing batch sizes, you think about short sprints to reduce the batch size. That's one of the beauties of Scrum is that Jeff Sutherland understood all that. He studied Lean when he created Scrum. But given that we can do that, we can do our development on cadence. But we should release whenever we want to release. We don't have to release on cadence. That might be handy. Salesforce.com still does. 3 times a year, that's what they've decided. So they sprint, release, sprint, release, but you don't have to. TradeStation in the back office, they release like every 3rd day, and in the front office, they only release twice a year. Not the same thing. So development cadence, not release cadence is the goal. Release cadence might work, it might not. Might not have to do that. But stay lean, okay? And as we stay lean, we have to think about this system now, this system that produces our software systems. It's a pretty big system. It's an organizational system. It creates great big systems. Where are we headed? How do we aim it? And for us, that's the portfolio level. And the understanding and codification of the portfolio level came really late in the development of SAFe. How come? Can anybody guess? What were the physics involved and why the portfolio stuff came late in SAFe?
You got to talk to people who don't read.
Yeah, you got to talk to people who actually are fairly agile, right? So it takes a while for enterprises to grow a sufficient agile prowess at the program level that the portfolio can start to think about turning on a dime. So it was only literally about 2008 or 2009 that I met the first companies that had sufficient agile prowess at the program level that they could start thinking about the portfolio differently. One of them had the ability to estimate all their epics. We use the word epics for really big stuff. I think it's a great word, and it's also a cautionary word. If somebody says, hey, I'd like to migrate all of our applications to a JBoss app server, that's an epic. What's that mean? That's going to be a pretty big job, folks. We should think deep thoughts about that before we launch that. Okay, so the portfolio gives the system its aim, and there are elements to that. And one of those elements is sorry, I moved that slide. One of those elements is Kanban system, which I'll show you in a second. But one of the key aspects of the entire system is visibility throughout the system. Basically, what you can't see hurts you, right? And the reason we have such a nasty problem with work in process and software development is that we can't see it. It's just a series, it's a set of backlog items I haven't done. It's all the projects I'm working on. It's the overhead, it's the multiplexing overhead of project to project to project. When we have a lot of small projects instead of a lot of big themes, we assign multiple people to projects. They switch project to project. They start paying the task switching overhead time, and pretty soon you can work really hard for 3 or 4 days and not move any piece of code further down the road a bit. So that's one of our problems. So Reinertsen calls that the principle of alignment. He says there's more value created with overall alignment than local excellence. So let's not worry so much about optimizing the flow soldering machine in the plant or team A or component B. Let's worry about optimizing the system. And for that, we need alignment. So alignment is a real key to keeping all those teams working towards the same thing. Lady yesterday apologized to the VAs. I'm not quite ready to apologize to the PMO office yet. I may get there. But the reason I don't feel I have to apologize is that while I did make a few comments in my book, I was in class a couple days ago, and a lady was sitting on my left, and she says, I head the PMO at blah, blah, blah bank, and I said, great, and she said, I'm glad to meet you. I was glad to meet you too. She said, you coined the phrase, the PMO that is often seen as the mothership of all impediments, right? That was you, right? I said, that was me. I'm I'm sorry about that. Maybe that wasn't well put. And she said, we have had a good laugh about that. That's been our mantra ever since, is let's not be the mothership of all impediments. But before we do that and take that affrontive, unnecessarily caustic approach, we have to recognize that the PMO provides things that no one else, it may not be a PMO as such, it may be the portfolio management function, provides things we need. They either provide or meter out strategy and investment funding. And we need that, right? That's what we eat. That's how we fund our programs. They can assist in program management, and especially in the larger enterprise. And the reason is that if you fully decentralize all of program management, and there's no common thread where they don't even talk back in or check back in, then you're going to have totally different types of program management practices. And then how do you harmonize your portfolio? How do I have an agile portfolio now? Well, they operate differently. The metrics are different. It reads differently entirely. And what you see on the right here and down to the bottom is basically a set of practices that have evolved that help us think about implementing those important functions, but in an intelligent, lean, and agile manner, right? How do we manage work? We manage demand and understand flow. We always have to manage demand because demand is imagination. Right? So there's always more that we think we can do. So we have to manage that part and understand flow. And there's more to that story. Transparency through the system builds trust. Now, trust is integral to the manifesto. Now, it tends to be a little one-sided. It basically says hire motivated people and trust them to get the job done. I don't think it says trust management back, right? And we feel that pain sometimes, right? So would anyone here posit that on some rare occasion, Agile, maybe Scrum, maybe has a little chip on its shoulder with respect to management? Anybody think so? Raise your hands if you think it has a tiny chip on its shoulder some of the time. Do you think that scales? No. So it doesn't scale. So we can't build trust in a framework, but we can build in transparency, and transparency builds trust. And the big stuff is the stuff you worry about the most, right? Those big initiatives, those killer initiatives, those moves to the cloud, convert to software as a service, convert to JBoss. Those are the ones that have to be reasoned about the most. Those are the ones that have the most impact. And that kind of brings us full circle to a framework it's a nice graphic online, but it doesn't make much of a graphic in a PowerPoint slide. It just looks like a bunch of dead blobs. But early on, I said we were taking a lean approach. And let me give you the difference between a lean approach to transformation and an agile approach to transformation. If you were Toyota or Nokia 15 years ago, and you had a supplier that wasn't operating as lean as you thought they could, that was part of your responsibility to help them get leaner. How come? What's the motivation to do that? Why do I care that my supplier isn't as lean as they could be? Why should I care? Pardon? It impacts the value. They've got too much inventory. Who are they charging that to? Me. Well, please don't do that. Okay. So I'll come help. So they would help. So part of lean is basically a much stronger supplier partnering procurement relationship. It's not win-lose. In the U.S., a lot of procurement is very much win-lose. I got such a deal. They'll have a hell of a time making money on that deal. That's not lean thinking. That's not persistent. That doesn't scale. That doesn't really last. And that's part of a short-sightedness, I think, driven a lot by at least kind of the American style of quarterly public reporting, et cetera. That's not really good. Anyway, so you would go in to fix that plant, but you don't walk down onto the floor in the corner and start moving parts around and helping the people build stuff, or you don't go into the raw goods and start talking to this guy about the fact that these got finished goods, talk about the fact that too much finished goods. You take the managers aside for lean boot camp and you teach them lean. How long does that take? How much time, if you went to a lean boot camp, if you're in a manufacturing plant in 1990, how much time do you think you'd spend in lean boot camp with these lean senseis? 2 weeks. Who said that? That's the typical number. That's pretty good. 2 weeks. And when you go in, you walk through your finished goods inventory with a sense of pride. You walk right by it, and you go into lean training, and you come out and you walk by finished goods. I can't believe we built all this stuff nobody's bought, right? So there's a little lobotomy that happens in there where they start seeing things differently. They do the games and the exercises. 2 weeks. And then their job is to go out and teach their people how to do those things, how to do problem solving, corrective action, and Kaizen events, and 5 Sigma. Here's a question. In the agile transformations that you're involved in, the lean and agile transformations, how much training and education have your managers and peers had in lean and agile development? None. 0. We're not going to succeed on that path. We're going to put our managers in a position of not understanding the new model. I'm going to go in and kind of coach the teams to a higher level of performance by keeping the manager out. And he's going to go to his boss and say, I'm not sure exactly how they work anymore, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be good stuff. Entirely different. Lean is led by leadership, right? Lean thinking is led by lean thinking manager teachers. Taiichi Ohno's words. It's kind of a little bit awkward, but I really like it. So we talk about what's it take to take somebody that doesn't understand it, somebody like me that didn't know this before I got involved in lean, and become a lean thinking manager teacher. It takes education. It takes a commitment to another big gulp from the lifelong learning jar. And they're trained in lean thinking, and they base those decisions, and they take responsibility for that success. So lean is different than agile, and lean takes a different point of view. And the lean point of view is that if you're managers, and I'm proud of you all here because you are lifelong learners, you came. You're surrounded by others who aren't here, and you're going to need their help, right? Who's going to teach them? It has to be you. Can't be me. Can't be the scrum coach, right? It's got to be you. So you have to find a way to help them get the understanding they need so they can be competent in their jobs. And not just competent, extremely competent, and become the leaders that you need to effect change. Because their leadership got you here. But the world is different, right? The nature of knowledge work is different, and the nature of the business is different. So that's it. The foundation of lean is leadership. That means the foundation of SAFE is you. So it's your problem, not mine. SAFE is a pretty cool thing, I think. I like it. It doesn't implement itself. It needs people to do that. And it needs people to do that to understand the basic principles, that are willing to be non-ideological and stick to the facts and focus on the results and say that, this team is running Kanban and they probably need a time box. That's cool. This team has got a really nice time box, but they have no idea of flow. We should think about how to improve that. Go.
Well, one of the things is that when you get lean thinking, you also often get Lean Six Sigma.
Yeah, you do. But that's a different kind of lean. That's like I don't want to make fun of Six Sigma. Six Sigma is extremely valuable for a purpose, which is to provide a statistical way to continually improve the quality of an operation, okay, and to provide an extremely predictable outcome of what you're doing. That's not what we're doing. We're innovating here. So I haven't had a lot of luck with the Six Sigma guys talking to them about innovation and variability. I give them Reinertsen, and they go away and say, okay, I'm ready to talk a little bit further. But lean and Six Sigma, manufacturing lean is not our lean, right? Six Sigma lean is not our lean. This is a different lean. Please read Reinertsen. Another question. Yeah.
You said at the end that it's up to us to find a way to help the leadership understand. Some of us are very low down in the organisation and perhaps don't have that sort of access. What would you say maybe the first step? So if we do meet the finance director in the coffee queue, how might we start the conversation?
So I've seen it done a number of ways. I mean, I've seen it done with it's not just we're going to go to management and retrain him. It might just be my manager. So you might read Poppendiek's book on lean because it's a lighter read book, and just have a little brown bag about that. You might encourage them. Some of you, we have courseware around this, not delivered by us, but delivered by partners. We have a 2-day, basically a lean leadership workshop for software managers. You'd encourage that. And if you do encourage that, don't put a gun at their head. Don't say you hereby are going to do a transformation. You ask a slightly different question. There's substantial changes going on in the software industry in terms of how softwares get developed. Who can afford not to learn about these new methods? So whatever approach you need, but you just know you have to go there. So I think if we focus more energy on that than solving the next impediment that's in front of us or hiring the next Scrum coach, we're probably going to be better off, because in the end, those people have to do the work. All right. Have time for one more or not?
Yeah, one more.
Okay.
Are you around for today, Dean?
Yeah, and actually, I'm going to go to. I'm going to go to the IJI booth because I've been working with those guys that kind of brought me here. I'll be there for about an hour. So if anybody has any questions, come down there. I'll be happy to talk more about the framework or anything else about lean and agile.
But perhaps one more in here.
Right, so I can just ask one question. So you talked about approaching epics, and you commented you really ought to think deeply about those before you start. You also talked about, you joked about that team of analysts working in Scrum to try and, I guess, ahead of the build starting. So that for me is the challenge for Scaled Agile, is how do you think deeply about epics so that you don't say we can't do it, but how do you get to that point where you don't need teams of analysts trying to get ready?
Well, interestingly enough, let me just kind of rephrase that a little bit. So what I don't understand is a Scrum team of analysts just doing analysis. What I do understand is analysts working on epics, exploring and maybe working in a time box. So maybe that Scrum team was really the right kind of thing. Now, I actually don't think it was. I think that was their version of waterfall, right? But thinking about analysis, if you go to the portfolio level, there's some deep thought there, because you're not going to launch a JBoss or a cloud computing initiative and just say go, right? We got to figure out, that could take all of the company for 5 years, or you could do nothing in 5 years. So you have to have some real thought associated with that. The tip for the Scaled Agile framework in terms of adoption is find 50 to 75 people working on a thing that has a lot of value, that's struggling, and convert them all to Agile using the framework, and everything else will shake out around it over time. Think about programs. When we went into the enterprise, I talked to a guy just out here at breakfast. He says, we went in, we've started 3 or 4 teams, and that's really cool. And he's going to get a good start. But let's start 3 or 4 programs. So just up the ante by an order of magnitude. And then, by the way, all those stakeholders and managers that were impediments, they're now on your program. So they're now part of the solution rather than part of the problem.
Thank you very much. Can we show our appreciation for Dean?
Thanks.
Thank you.